Welcome back. If you've been following my channel for a little while, you might have already seen my bookbinding tutorials where I made these two books. And today I'm doing something a little bit different because my current book project is a little bit more complicated. Wow. It's not necessarily more difficult, there's just more steps involved. So I've actually been working on this over the last few days and I've realised it's going to be too much to cram into one video. So I'm going to split it into probably 3 parts. And what I'm going to show you today is this exciting thing. I know it doesn't look like much, but basically my new book is going to be a notebook with lined paper, and I'm just briefly talk about the difficulties of using purchased lined paper and how you can make your own. It's quite simple to do, but if you don't want to take the time to do it, there's actually a link below where you can buy my template for the lined paper if you don't want to put the time in to create it yourself. And then the other things I'll be showing in this video is I want to add some tabs into my book, and I'll show you a couple of different options. I've obviously got a die where I've cut this one out, but I'll show you a couple of options you can do if you want to make tabs but you don't have the die. And also with the sizing for cutting the covers, which is just an extra step than what I've done previously, because I am adding tabs, I want to make sure that the covers are big enough to protect the tabs. So that's basically what I'm going to be showing in this video. The one thing I'm not showing is how to do the actual stitching. Because I've shown that in my previous 2, I didn't think there was much point in showing it again, like the exact same process. So I will link these videos below. Like in this one, we've got just a plain fabric cover and I just stitched it with white cotton. This one we've got a decorative paper cover, but when I did the stitching demonstration I used a coloured thread so that it would be clearer. And also in this one we've got a ribbon bookmark and a pocket at the back. So if either of those things are of interest, obviously you can have a look and click the link for those. My next plan for this is the second part of this series will cover the spine, because I'm planning to do something a little bit more interesting with the spine, which you'll see later in this video. I don't want to cover everything in my introduction, but just so you know what you're getting into. As for the decorative element of the cover, I'm not 100% sure yet how it's going to look, but I think it's going to be something similar to this one, where we've got a decorative paper on the main part of the cover, and then the spine and the corners will have fabric. So a little bit different to my previous ones where one was all fabric, one was all paper. This one's going to be a combination of the 2. So hopefully that will be of interest. And like I say, I'm expecting it to be a 3-part series. So here we go. So for my next bookbinding project, I want to make myself a nice lined notebook. And the problem with lined paper is its portrait, which if you're just buying lined paper to use as it is, that's fine. But if you want to bind it into your own notebook, you're going to be folding it this way. Now, if you're making a junk journal, where your pages are all haphazard and you've got some with holes in and some that are ripped and stained and, you know, whatever else, that's fine. But if you want a nice presentable notebook, you want the lines this way, don't you? So if you're using A4 paper that you've bought lined, or I'm assuming it's the same in America if you're using the 8.5 by 11, it's going to be in portrait. So when you fold it, the lines are going the wrong way, unless you want to do it like this and have a tiny notebook, which is nice. I have done some like that in the past, using purchased lined paper and just done a small little notebook, but I want to do an A5. So what I've done is I've actually made my own lined paper. So here we've got the landscape lined paper instead of portrait. So I actually made two different versions of this template, I guess you'd call it. Well, it's not, well, document, template, whatever you want to call it. I did this one which has got narrow lines, and then I also did another one which has got wider spaces between the lines. I haven't actually got one of those printed out to show you at the moment, but I'll show you that a little bit later. So of course you could do what I did and you could go and set this up yourself. I set it up in Word and then I've converted it to a PDF. But in the description below there's a link to my Etsy shop where you can actually purchase the PDF. It's only just going to be a couple of quid, not very much, just if you want to save yourself the time and effort of setting it up yourself. And because it is such a simple document, I will include both the wide and the narrow ruled design in that sale. So when it comes to printing this, if you do it from the PDF at the actual size of the file, these are the dimensions you get. So the top line where you would have your heading or date or whatever you want to use your top line for in your notebook is approximately 15 millimeters, and then the gap between the lines is 6 millimeters. If, however, when you print it as fit to page or shrink to fit, you'll get this like border around the edge. I don't know if you can see that. So depending on whether you prefer this option where it just sort of fades away off the edge, or whether you want an actual sort of printed border, it's up to you, whichever way you prefer. But I prefer it without the border. Okay, so I know all computers are different, I know all printers are different, but I'm just going to attempt, if I can, to show you on my laptop how I actually set up the printing. Okay, so I've no idea if this is going to work with actually filming my screen with the camera. I'm sure most people, when they do this, they've got some fancy way of actually sort of doing a screen capture, but I've no idea how to do that. So I'm going to attempt to do it with the camera. Okay, so if you're ready to print, I just use the shortcut of Control P, and then I've only got one printer, so that's fine. Probably don't need to go into the properties, because I think what we're doing is so basic, it's all just going to be on this first screen. Of course, your printer setup may be different depending what type of computer you're using as well, I guess. I just show you how it works on mine, and then hopefully that will give you enough information that you know what to check for on your own. So I've got this set up to print in grayscale, so just black and white. All pages, because my printer can do double-sided, so I'm printing both pages at the same time. If your printer doesn't do double-sided, you can just do one page and then print however many copies you want of the one page, and then put those printed papers back in the printer and then print again for the second page. And you might just need to do a little bit of fiddling around, a couple of test copies, so that you can kind of work out which way you need to put your first side back in the printer so that it prints correctly the second side. But as I said, mine does automatic double-sided, so that does make my life easier. Okay, so we've got all pages, and then on here with the size, you want to choose actual size if it gives you that option. If you do shrink or fit to page, you're going to have a funny sort of border around the edge. So if you've got that option, you want 100% or actual size. And then on mine, I've got the option to print on both sides, and you want to flip on the short edge so that the bigger margin stays at the top on the front and the back. If you do flip on the long edge, you'll have the big margin on the top one side and on the bottom the other side, and obviously you don't want that. I've also set mine to landscape, but to be honest, I think it would figure that out automatically anyway. Okay, so we've just got black and white, all pages, actual size, double side on the short edge, and then you're ready to go. I'm actually wanting to do quite a big notebook, so I'm actually going to set it to do 100 copies, and off we go. Okay, so I set it to print all those pages, and it's just run out of paper, so I thought I'd just take that opportunity where there's a moment of silence to show you. I'm putting the pages into groups of 4, so I've got 4 sheets printed and then just folded into my signature. Okay, so now I'm just going to carry on. I'll put some more paper in and let that carry on printing, and I will have a lot of signatures to stitch together. I'm not actually going to demonstrate the sewing in this video. I will link below to 2 other videos which I shared. So as you can see, my pages are now all stitched together, and it's quite a chunky one. It's not actually as many pages as I originally intended, because the paper ran out again, and I looked at how much there was and I thought, yeah, that's probably enough. So at this stage, what I would normally do would be attach the decorative end papers and put a reinforcing piece of fabric over the spine. But I'm not going to do it quite in that order for this one. And the reason for that is I've not decided yet what colour I want on the front cover, or the outside cover. And quite often what decision I make about the outside cover affects what choice I make for my end papers. So I'm just going to put this aside for now. So although I don't know what colour I'm going to do the outside, I've kind of got an idea of the type of design that I want to do. So this is a little one that I made some time ago, and I actually made it quite badly. But what I did was I've got decorative paper on the main part of the cover, and then I've got fabric over the spine and the corners. And because my notebook is so chunky, obviously I'm going to be using it for quite a long time, so I want to protect the corners, and these fabric corners, it just gives that bit of extra protection. I think traditionally these parts would be leather, but I'm not using leather today. The other thing which I would like to do, I'll show you this other sample, which is actually leather. I've got these ridges on the spine. Hopefully that shows up. and I'd quite like to do that. So I'm going to have this decorative paper with the fabric spine and corners, but then I will have perhaps a slightly curved spine with the raised ridges. So that's the look we're going for. So now we need to think about actually cutting some hard covers and think about our sizing. Okay, so let's bring in this, so I make a note of my sizes so I don't have to try and keep them all in my head. And for the height of the covers and also the spine, you want the height of the paper plus a little bit extra for overhang. So my paper, the height is 21 centimeters. So I'm just going to do it at 21.5. That'll just give me just a couple of millimeters extra on either side. And then with the width, now normally what I would do is I would do the width the same as the paper, because when you make the cover, if you've not already seen my binding tutorial, I just briefly just to let you know, when you do the spine and the cover, you leave a little extra gap so that it's like a hinge, and that extra little gap kind of pushes the cover over just that little bit extra. So now what I do is I just keep the width the same as the paper, so that that little gap where it pushes it across just gives just enough overhang. So having said that, I would normally do the width at 15 centimeters, but on this particular one I'd like to add some tabs that stick out, and I would like the tabs to be protected by the covers. So before we can properly measure the width of the covers, we need to know how much the tabs are going to stick out. So let's have a look at my tab options. So first of all, I've got these two little die cuts which are specifically designed for making tabs, and I've got this tiny little die cut machine. It feels wrong even calling it a machine. It's just a little hand wound one, and it's just very small. So these are the cutting plates. So as you can see, the width of them, it's kind of just the width of my fingers, so I can't cut anything bigger than that. So on a tangent, if I happen to be in a craft shop and I see some lovely die cuts, I know that if the die cuts are wider than the width of my fingers, they won't fit in my machine. And at the moment I don't do enough die cutting to be able to justify buying a bigger machine, so I just stick to doing little die cuts. So let's see how this would work. I've got just a little skinny strip of card cut, and this is it's just 160 gram card. It's pretty thin really as card goes. But if I just put these two on here, they can go through at the same time. I just crank. Ooh, it makes the most awful noise. Okay, let's put these aside. Okay, so these are the two cuts I get. So when they're folded in half, I've got one that's almost circular and then this one. Now if you've not got a die cut machine, you can still do tabs. I've got a couple of other options that I can show you. If you've got a circle punch, I believe this one is 2 inches. Yeah, it's about 2 inches. It doesn't have to be a circle, but so if you just pop that, and then if you just fold that in half, and then cut it down the middle, and then you could glue those two pieces together to make a curved tab. It's quite big, perhaps 2 inches might be bigger than what you want. Another option is with a square. This is just, again, it's just 2 inch square. Just fold it in half, and there you go, you've got an instant tab. If you happen to have a corner punch, that's a nice little touch, because then you can just, oh, I didn't do that one very well, but you can just round off the corners. So on your pages you would just glue that, probably best, I mean you could do it straight onto one side, but I think it's stronger if you glue it like either side of the page. So you'd have that bit glued and then your tab, or if you're doing the circle, might be a bit fiddly getting the two sides lined up on the circle, but that's quite cute, having the little semicircular tabs. But seeing as I've got the die cuts, it would make sense for me to use them. So if I did the round one, look like that. Oops. Or the slightly more rectangular one. Probably not sensible to try and do them both at the same time. But yeah, so they would be glued down. Now I think the round one, for what I'm using, I think that sticks out way too far, because I'd have to have my cover sticking out like an extra inch, which I don't think I want that. So I think I'm going to stick with this smaller one. So let's bring my measurement sheet back, and this means that I want the width of my cover, oops, let's make sure that's lined up properly. Instead of being the 15 centimeters of the paper, I think I'm just going to do it at 15 and a half. Okay, I've no idea yet how many of these I'm going to need, because I'm just going to add them as I go through. I'm not going to put them on in advance. And then the width of the spine is 3 centimeters. Okay, so all my measurements are in centimeters, and so now I'm ready to start cutting my covers and spine. So if you've seen me do my other bookbinding videos, you'll know that I like to use this mount board for my covers. So this is when you have a picture framed and you've got the board where they cut the middle out of the mount to show the picture through. So this is basically the scrap of what's been cut out of the middle of one of those boards. In my town we've got a scrap store where they sell various bits and bobs which sort of goes towards charity, and a lot of local businesses just donate their offcuts, which can be, you know, used perhaps in children's school projects or whatever. So every so often I go to the shop and I pick up a big stack of these throwaway middles of the mount boards. But obviously if you've not got that available to you, what you can do is just use several layers of thinner card, even like from cereal packets or something like that, and just glue a few layers together until you get the size, the thickness and the stiffness that you want for your cover. If you are going to do that, you want to make sure you put it under a heavy weight to dry, because the glue will make it buckle. Okay, so let's get to cutting these. I've got my sizes which I'll just put to the side here. And then I've got this little trimmer which is not designed to do anything quite so heavy duty as I'm doing today. But what I've discovered with these boards is if I cut it and then flip it and cut it again, it will cut through the full thickness. Okay, so we've got our front and back covers. So if I put those on the block, and you can see we've got a small overhang top and bottom, hopefully you can see that, and a bigger overhang at the side. But as I said, once we put the cover on and you've got the little gap for the hinge, then it'll be an even bigger overhang on the sides, which will protect the tabs. So thanks for watching all the way to the end, and in the second part of this series we'll be doing the spine, and I'll show you how to do a curved spine with the raised ridges, or I'll show you a way to do it. There's obviously multiple ways to do it, but I'll just show you one. And then if you want to see any of my other videos, I'll just let YouTube decide which one they think you'll be most interested in, and also my bookbinding playlist. So if you wanted to look at those previous bookbinding videos and some others, they're in this playlist. Alright, thanks for watching. See you again soon.